The Chernobyl nuclear power accident. It deeply affected the Soviet people and disturbed world opinion.
The accident, he told his countrymen, has now claimed 9 lives and injured 299 others. He tried to explain what went wrong.
The power of the reactor suddenly increased. There was a considerable discharge of steam, and the subsequent reaction led to the formation of hydrogen, its explosion, and the destruction of the reactor, and the accompanying radioactive discharge.
Chernobyl Disaster. Accident in 1986 at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union. The worst disaster in the history of nuclear power generation. The Chernobyl power station was situated at the settlement of Pripyat, 10 miles northwest of the city of Chernobyl and 65 miles north of Kyiv, Ukraine. The station consisted of 4 reactors, each capable of producing 1,000 megawatts of electric power. It had come online in 1977 to 1983. What caused the Chernobyl disaster? And is Chernobyl safe to visit? Is Reactor 4 still burning?
Before we begin, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos.
On April 26, 1986, a sudden surge of power during a reactor systems test destroyed Unit 4 of the nuclear power station at Chernobyl, Ukraine, in the former Soviet Union. The accident and the fire that followed released massive amounts of radioactive material into the environment. Emergency crews responding to the accident used helicopters to pour sand and boron onto the reactor debris. The sand was to stop the fire and additional releases of radioactive material. The boron was to prevent additional nuclear reactions. A few weeks after the accident, the crews completely covered the damaged unit in a temporary concrete structure called the sarcophagus to limit further release of radioactive material. The Soviet government also cut down and buried about a square mile of pine forest near the plant to reduce radioactive contamination at and near the site. Chernobyl's 3 other reactors were subsequently restarted, but all eventually shut down for good, with the last reactor closing in 1999. The Soviet Union nuclear power authorities presented their initial accident report to an International Atomic Energy Agency meeting in Vienna, Austria in August 1986. After the accident, officials closed off the area within 18 miles of the plant, except for persons with official business at the plant and those people evaluating and dealing with the consequences of the accident and operating the undamaged reactors. The Soviet and later on Russian government evacuated about 115,000 people from the most heavily contaminated areas in 1986 and another 220,000 people in subsequent years. The 1986 Chernobyl accident. On the 25th of April, prior to a routine shutdown, the reactor crew at Chernobyl 4 began preparing for a test to determine how long turbines would spin and supply power to the main circulating pumps following a loss of main electrical power supply. This test had been carried out at Chernobyl the previous year, but the power from the turbine ran down too rapidly, so new voltage regulator designs were to be tested. A series of operator actions, including the disabling of automatic shutdown mechanisms, preceded the attempted test earlier on April 26. By the time that operator moved to shut down the reactor was in an extremely unstable condition. A peculiarity of the design of the control rods caused a dramatic power surge as they were inserted into the reactor. The interaction of very hot fuel with the cooling water led to fuel fragmentation along with rapid steam production and an increase in pressure. The design characteristics of the reactor were such that substantial damage to even 3 or 4 fuel assemblies would, and did, result in the destruction of the reactor. The overpressure caused the 1,000-ton cover plate of the reactor to become partially detached, rupturing the fuel channels and damaging all the control rods, which by that time were only halfway down. Intense steam generation then spread throughout the whole core, fed by water dumped into the core due to the rupture of the emergency cooling circuit, causing a steam explosion and releasing fission products into the atmosphere. About 2 to 3 seconds later, a second explosion threw out fragments from the fuel channels and hot graphite. There is some dispute among experts about the character of this second explosion, but it is likely to have been caused by the production of hydrogen from zirconium steam reactions. 2 workers died as a result of these explosions. The graphite, about a quarter of the 1,200 tons of it was estimated to have been rejected, and fuel became incandescent. and started a number of fires, causing the main release of radioactivity into the environment. About a total of 14 EBQ of radioactivity was released, and over half of it being from biologically inert noble gases. About 200 to 300 tons of water per hour was injected into the intact half of the reactor using the auxiliary feed water pumps, but this was stopped after half a day owing to the danger of flowing into and flooding units 1 and 2. From the 2nd to the 10th day of the accident, some 5,000 tons of boron, dolomite, sand, clay, and lead were dropped onto the burning core by helicopter in an effort to extinguish the blaze and limit the release of radioactive particles. The 1991 report by the State Committee on the Supervision of Safety in Industry and Nuclear Power on the root cause of the accident looked past the operators' actions. It said that while it was certainly true the operators placed their reactor in a dangerously unstable condition, in fact, in a condition that was virtually guaranteed an accident, it was also true that in doing so, they had not in fact violated a number of vital operating policies and principles, since no such policies and principles had been articulated. Additionally, the operating organization had not been made aware of either of the specific safety significances of maintaining a minimum operating reactivity margin, or the general reactivity characteristics of the RBMK, which made lower power operations extremely hazardous. Historic disaster. Soon, the world realized that it was witnessing a historic event. Up to 30% of Chernobyl's 190 metric tons of uranium was now in the atmosphere, and the Soviet Union eventually evacuated 335,000 people, establishing a 19-mile-wide exclusion zone around the reactor. At least 28 people initially died as a result of the accident, while more than 100 were injured. The United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation has reported that more than 6,000 children and adolescents developed thyroid cancer after being exposed to radiation from the incident, although some experts have challenged that claim. International researchers have predicted that ultimately around 4,000 people exposed to high levels of radiation could succumb to radiation-related cancer, while about 5,000 people exposed to lower levels of radiation may suffer the same fate. Yet the full consequences of the accident, including impacts on mental health and even subsequent generations, remain highly debated and under study. What remains of the reactor is now inside a massive steel containment structure deployed in late 2016. Containment efforts and monitoring continue, and cleanup is expected to last until at least 2065. Visiting Chernobyl. To enter the 18.6-mile exclusion zone, you will need a day pass, which is only available from certain established tour operators, and you must apply at least 10 days in advance. Basically, to go into the exclusion zone without either A, a tour operator, or B, a qualified nuclear fallout expert with your own safety and monitoring equipment is plain crazy. The environment in relation to radiation levels in certain areas is extremely dynamic, and without proper measurement, you could be exposing yourself to harmful levels.